Guys, I'm TJS, and this is my dad,
Hi guys.
and we're going to show you how you can code your first C++ game using SDL2.
Thank you very much, TJS. This is a video game tutorial aimed at people who already know how to make games with Python and Pygame. So you've already made a few games with Python and Pygame, and for whatever reason you're interested in doing the same thing in C++. Maybe you just want to make some more sophisticated games that still run pretty fast, or maybe you just want to learn a new programming language. You want to learn C++, and you think that making video games is a good way to learn a programming language. And it absolutely is. It's a fantastic way to learn a programming language. So let's get started with it. I am making a few other assumptions, though. I'm assuming you've got your C++ compiler installed and you've got SDL2 attached to it. Now that's a bit bigger of an assumption, and you might not have that done. If you don't worry about it for now. Just look at this as a demo. I just want to show you how easy it is to get up and running in C++. The installation it's a little bit painful to get done. It's a little boring, but you do it once and then you're done forever. I'll make another video about that later if there's interest, and there are a lot of websites on how to get that set up. So it's just something everybody has to go through the first time they're getting things set up. It's not what you want to do at the beginning when you're all excited, but it does need to be done. But we'll get around that and we'll say it's all already hooked up, and then how do you make your video game? Only knowing Python and Pygame. Maybe you know a few C++ commands, but the C++ commands we're going to start with are pretty much the same as Python. And instead of tabs, you got curly braces and there's a semicolon at the end of each line, but more or less it's going to seem pretty familiar to you. But first of all, let's show you what we're going to do here. We're going to make the bare bones start of a video game. We're going to pop up on a window, have it all black, put a red square on that window, and have it move around. When it gets to the edge, it's going to flip back around to the other side. Not much of a video game. With a little imagination, you can see how this might turn into something better. And in future videos, we'll hook a joystick up to that square. We'll turn the square into a picture, have you moving around the picture, have other dragons chasing you around, trying to eat you, have some sound effects when things go good or bad, and a score up at the top. But all that's to come later. For now, we just want to get started. So let's do that. Let's get started. Now the code here is in the description. There's a link to it in the description. You probably just want to grab that and type it in and watch it go. But I'm just going to go through very briefly here and tell you what some of this means. I'll tell you what parts are important to understand and what parts you just take on faith that, yeah, I need that in there and I don't need to know why. The first parts are just that. You need them in here. You don't really need to understand them. You just need them there. And then we'll do the boring parts first. Boring, complicated parts first, and then the interesting, easier parts second. And the interesting, easier parts are the parts you'll then use to make your own video game. What we have here is the beginning and the end. In the beginning, we declare a few variables. We declare a few things we need, like windows and something called a renderer, which might be new to you. Think of the renderer as just like a pen that draws on the screen, draws on the window. We've got an initialize and a quit, and C++, whenever you make something big, you also destroy it at the end. We'll talk more about that later as we start making more complicated videos, but for now, just know that this has to be in here every time you make a game. And then I'm going to put in a game loop, which you might be familiar with. While game over equals false, or some kind of while loop like that. And I've got another curly brace down here at the bottom. And again, don't bother typing this as we go along. I'm just trying to give you a basic idea of what's happening, go through the structure. I've got a game loop here that says while game over equals false, do my game loop stuff right in here. And the first thing I've also got in here is this poll event thing, and you've probably seen something like that in Pygame where you look for a pygame.event and you're looking for a quit command, like somebody clicked on the X in the upper right and quit. That's what this does. The same thing as in Pygame. This just makes sure that the person can exit without having to Control-Alt-Delete and get rid of their window or anything like that. But in here, you put the juicy stuff of your game. Although a couple other uninteresting things are things you only do once, like I said, and you just leave in there. You need a render present, which says whatever you've drawn, put it on the screen, and you need a delay, which is like your time.sleep in Python. Now, I'll say, first of all, this Stl Delay, there are much better ways to do this when you get more sophisticated games. This is just very similar to what you might do in Python with Pygame, a time.sleep 30 milliseconds. and so it's going to be familiar to you. It's going to be very easy to get started with. Won't be the most efficient way to run your game, but it probably is a lot easier to get started with this than the best way, which would go faster. And now let's do the interesting stuff. All the boring stuff's in there. Let's do something interesting. The first interesting thing I want to do is I want to grab a black pen and paint the screen black. So I've got my SDL set render draw color to 000. That's black, for those of you who remember RGB. And SDL render clear says draw the whole window with the renderer color. So I'm going to do a Control S and F9, and now I've got my Pygame window popped open. It's all black. It's not doing anything. I can click on the X in the upper right and close it. That is kind of the boring overhead you need to start your new video game in C++. And some of this is familiar from Python. It's probably a little bit more than you're used to seeing in Python. C++ is more complicated than Python. There's more overhead, but in return you'll have things going faster. But at this point, once you get the overhead in there, things get quite a bit easier and more like you're familiar with from Python. I'm going to declare a player rect, much like you'd declare a pygame.rect in Python. Instead of a pygame.rect, I've got an SDL rect. I'm going to call it player rect. And a rectangle object in SDL is identical to a rectangle object in Python. It's got four values associated with it: a width, a height, and an X and a Y associated with the upper left corner of it. And I set them pretty similar to how I would do it, actually almost identical to how I would do it in Python. I set my width equal to 64 pixels here, my height equal to 64 pixels, my X and Y equal to 200. That's the X and Y position of the upper left on the screen. And I've got my player rect set. Now what I want to do is I want to draw that rectangle on the screen, and I do that with two more commands. One is change my pen to red, because if I left my pen at black, I'd draw a black rectangle on a black screen and I wouldn't be able to see it. So I set it to red, so 000 to 25500, turn on the red channel of the color. And then render fill rect is how I take my player rect and fill it with that color. And there's an ampersand in front of the player rect. Don't worry about that for now. It'll become more familiar to you later. I'll explain more of it later in later videos, but for now just know you need that ampersand, much like you need the command, and you don't need to understand why just yet. And I Control S and F9, and now I have my window and I have a red rectangle on it. So things are starting to get interesting. It looks a lot more like a video game to me now. Now I want to do something even more interesting. I want to make that that rectangle move. And this, again, you're getting more and more similar to Python now. I'm going to do these four commands here. And I'm going to do it after I've done I can put it anywhere I want to be truthful, but maybe after, right in here. Good place. So after I've drawn my rectangle, I'm going to update my rectangle. I'm going to take the X and I'm going to add 5 to it every iteration of the game loop. Add 2 to the Y, so it's going to slide to the down and to the right. It'll be going a little more slow, a little more quickly across than down. And if I find that my X coordinate gets greater than the edge of the screen, I'm going to reset it to 0. And if my Y coordinate gets greater than the height of the screen, I'm going to set that to 0. And you can probably see the similarities to Python here. Curly braces instead of tabs, but otherwise fairly similar. I do a Control S and F9, and I've got my character moving across the screen.
And that's it.
And later videos will show you how to turn this into something a little more complicated, but for now, this is the start.
Yeah, this is the start of some bigger things I'll create in the future.
Thank you for watching.
Yep, thanks for watching. Bye.